Hi, welcome to Ross and Zed Talk Games. This is Ross Hersman. I'm here with my friend Suzanne.
Hi, this is Suzanne, aka Zed. This week has actually been a really awesome one for us. We spent the weekend out at the Ohio Game Developers Expo in Columbus, and it was spectacular. And we had a really great time doing a panel talking about different types of law and how they apply to the video game space.
It was a pretty good conversation. We were joined by Andrew Trafford, Porter Wright out in Columbus, who talked about some business principles and startups and venture capital, angel investors, that kind of thing. And Zed and I talked about trademarks, patents, right of publicity, constitutional law. We had a really great audience of about 75 dedicated game developers and game fans who asked us about
Everything.
everything, I guess. So hopefully we answered some of their questions. But I know on the ride back, we definitely spent a lot of time talking about some recent games that have come out and some of our concerns with game development in general and the business side of releasing games and kind of how they're released.
Yeah, we were talking about how there's this trend now that there's no final disc day. It's not back in the old console days when you went out and got your little cartridge and that was the game. Now it's games via the internet or CDs that require internet access for patches and updates, and how this has created this system where we're getting these really terrible games on launch day that are missing major chunks of things, or what people perceive to be major chunks of things.
It's a tricky thing because I know a lot of gamers will, they're very savvy consumers. They will read reviews, they'll watch game trailers, they'll watch game footage on YouTube, or they'll watch Let's Plays. And they'll be very discerning customers, and they may buy a game solely on a particular aspect of that game that they've been promised, whether it's online multiplayer or an in-game chat feature, a particular kind of skin download that they can get for their avatar. And those things aren't always available on launch day. Sometimes those things take 3 months, 6 months, or even a year to be released in a later firmware patch. And in the meantime, those gamers don't really have a whole lot of recourse. I mean, they can be vocal on forums and message boards, and they can try to pursue whatever avenue they think may get them what they want, but a lot of times they don't have much.
Well, we've seen a couple lawsuits and we've seen complaints with the FCC, but we don't know what's going to happen because judges have seen this tiny writing on packaging or this disclaimer on the website saying not all features may be available immediately upon launch, which seems to be the new norm on your Steam page or on your web page, saying not all features, not everything in the ad is going to be there necessarily, to protect yourself from being perceived as one of these people that's ripping off the public.
Mm-hmm. And gamers don't have much that they can really do about it. I mean, a lot of time the hype is more important than the quality. Someone will really want to get a particular game on launch day or at a midnight release so that they can play it with their buddies. I know not too long ago I bought a copy of the Gauntlet reboot, because I was a big fan of the Gauntlet franchise and I was really excited to play it the day it came out. So I know I bought several copies for my friends and I bought a new headset so that I could chat with them. And then on game day, the game wasn't really optimized for my particular PC. There were some driver compatibility issues. And I think those have been remedied since, but I know it was at least a month or two before things really got going and my friends and I could have that LAN party we've been talking about for a couple of months. And there was really nothing I could do about it. I just had to wait until that patch came out. And in the meantime, it was a download for me, so I couldn't take it back to my local retailer and say this didn't work. It's not like a broken toaster where you can just take it back to where you bought it and say it doesn't make toast.
But the issue with the kind of return policies you get with a toaster is that if my toaster's broken, either A, I'll take it back and get a new one, and they'll exchange it, or they'll give me my money back, and I won't have completed the toaster. There are lots of players that get a game on day one, play through the entire campaign over the course of a week, and are just finished and done and over with. And then there are gamers like me who have bought games months ago that haven't even made it out of the package yet, or haven't even been downloaded to my PC yet. And if we have a return policy, it's obviously going to be temporal in nature, and they're going to say you have 2 weeks to return the game, and then that gamer that completed in a week can say, well, it's broken, and return it, because they just wanted the campaign. They don't care about the online compatibility that's broken.
Right, publishers and retailers are going to try and have that balancing test of catering to their consumers who haven't had a chance to play the game yet, or those consumers who have played it don't mind that it might not be 100% finished, and try to take advantage of that return policy.
Exactly, especially when it's factors like the online compatibility or a certain ability in a game. Like if I really want to be a vampire and I saw a vampire in the trailer and I get it out of the box at home and vampires aren't available until 2 patches from now for whatever reason they weren't considered necessary for release day, should I be allowed to take it back and say, no, never mind, I won't play until I can be a vampire?
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword where technology now is offering us the opportunity to remedy games that might not be finished with firmware updates or software updates and patches that we didn't have in the mid-90s when things were cartridge-based. When you had release day, that was the final product regardless. And something I wonder about is that it necessarily a good thing? Are publishers using firmware updates as a crutch to release a project that really is in beta on release day and then just trust that gamers will be patient enough to wait for a finished product later? Or were we better off when publishers were under the gun on a deadline to put out a finished product by a certain date and then they never have the opportunity to offer features that they promised initially? When Halo shipped, I know that online multiplayer for the original Halo was a major talking point, and it didn't happen by release day. It was there for Halo 2, but I know a lot of people in Halo wanted that online multiplayer that is now such a big part of that franchise.
So basically, what we're becoming as consumers is free beta testers without any of the legal recourse that a lot of quality control people has, because quality control people are getting ostensibly some kind of paycheck for their work. We're paying for the chance to test these games that are supposed to be finished, done, and ready to go, and say that, well, these are the features that we're really bothered aren't there. And I wonder sometimes if there are like an undercurrent of features that we were promised in one way or another that not enough people, or maybe no one notices, are missing, so they just never get called out, and this big AAA company gets to skip the development costs on an entire aspect of a game because the public, who is now their free Q&A, is just not noticing.
I think it makes a big difference what kind of genre, what kind of game, and what kind of publisher you're talking about as well. For a AAA title, I understand as a gamer that they have the resources to play testers to work out all the kinks before I see the final product, and I'm less inclined to pay for a beta or to do that play testing for them because for me it's not worth it. Now on the other hand, for an indie game that might not have the deep pockets to do that kind of play testing and that I'm a fan of, if it's a game that might not come out without my help, I might be willing to pay some amount to do a beta or give feedback or talk to developers about things I'd like to see in the game or things I'd like to see removed, to give my input to help them craft the game. But again, that's something I'm only willing to do if it's something that I have like a personal investment in. I don't think all games are privy to that kind of commitment from a fan base.
So if a major publisher were to put their game on Steam Greenlight in a beta stage and say, all right, it's going to be $60 when it comes out, it's $40 now, it's not finished because we don't have online play or something like that, do you think the public would be open to that as an alternative? Because there's a lot going on Greenlight right now, and a lot of people are willing to pay either full price or something like full price for what is essentially a broken or unfinished product.
I think that asterisk is really important. I think that in that scenario you described, the fact that the publisher is saying this isn't finished, this still may have bugs, this isn't a completed product yet, I think that drastically alters a gamer's expectations to know what they're getting into. I know that when the Halo 3 beta came out or the Halo 4 Reach betas came out, those came shipped with completed games already. So I was happy to play a game that I wouldn't have had access to anyway otherwise. But again, I didn't have to pay for it directly. I was buying another game and was getting free access to something new. I think that's something great about Steam Greenlight is that you can get access to a franchise early. And if you're that much of a fanboy, you want to get to it soon, that's fantastic. But again, I don't think it's something that most people would be willing to pay for.
So do you think that, is it better to ship an unfinished game and over the next 6 months finish it and have people playing your game and talking about your game and having shipped on time for whether it be a console launch or the holiday season, or to pull Watch Dogs and say, hey, we know we said we'd ship with the new consoles, but it's not even close to done. We're going to wait 6 months and then ostensibly lose some portion of the public that would have bought had it been, or that would have bought it as a gift, or for whatever reason not have those initial sales that bump you over the edge into long-term support.
I think that's a question a lot of publishers have to ask themselves, and it comes down to what resources they have and what they're able to do, and what kind of legacy they're trying to make. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd be able to release a perfect product on time, shipped to your consumers. But that doesn't always happen. There's always hiccups with technology or distribution or marketing, and you might have trademark or IP problems crop up at the last minute that you would never foresee that might delay your game, even 5 years. But I think the publishers have to be very conscious of that decision, where they have to run the risk of saying, well, we're going to release a game that might not be finished on time so that people who want it can get it now. And they may be indifferent to the shortcomings of the game. And hopefully in 6 months when we, patch the thing, they won't mind. We won't have alienated our audience or created a PR problem for ourselves that will hurt future sales. Or on the other hand, they have to take the gamble that their consumers are dedicated enough to wait that 6 months or a year until a more complete finished product is released and still show up to pay for that product. And that's a risky run. There might be a new game coming out a year from now that might overshadow yours. There might be a new console. There may be a PR problem that might make your game undesirable. You don't know.
Yeah, the games that have been released have faced a lot of legal issues, which are not cheap at all. Even with their in-house people, they are probably pulling it out-of-house people and dealing with FCC complaints, generalized litigation, and all number of other things. And it seems like they think that that is the cheaper option than delaying launch, because it's happened enough now that if you're releasing a truly broken game, you have to expect some kind of user response. And understandably, most users can't afford a lawyer to start a lawsuit and don't have the time to petition the FCC to go after EA or BioWare or whoever it is this time around. And the big companies have in-house teams, but still, it's not a cheap thing to go through.
It's definitely a calculated risk. I think a great analogy would be mechanical defects in cars and automobiles. I mean, if you're making a Ford Pinto, if you're making a car that might have a design defect that may make it undesirable to consumers, like blowing up, you have to run those numbers to decide, is it cheaper to do a product recall and fix the problem, or is it cheaper to release as is and pay the lawsuits that result? And with games like Aliens Cloning Marines, I think that's exactly what they did. When you have a game stuck in development hell for over a decade, it might be cheaper for you to release a game that's not perfect and call the consumer's bluff on releasing patches. Now that game in particular, they've released some patches to fix some of the problems that were in it. But at the same time, they took a major hit on their PR. Yeah. Now I don't know how that's going to affect future releases on that franchise. Alien Isolation seems to be doing better than projections.
But in this industry, we don't necessarily have those same metrics that the auto industry does. The auto industry has been around for so long, we know how consumers will respond to a little Bronco that's going to flip 10% of the time. We don't have enough long-term metrics in the industry, let alone in digital distribution models, to know what percentage of the time a consumer is actually going to drag you into court, what percentage of the time you're going to get an FCC complaint that's actually legitimized through the government and where they are coming into your office and auditing your files and just disrupting all of your business. So can you ever really make a reasonable assumption about how it's going to look at the end?
I don't know that you can. I think from a consumer perspective, the best plan of attack you can have is to be patient and be informed. Read as many reviews of a game as you can, watch gameplay footage, talk to your friends, ask them what they thought of it, and make an informed decision before you purchase and double down on something you're questionable about. And I think the reverse is true for publishers. I think their best strategy for shipping a game is to be forthright and very straightforward with consumers and not give rise to false expectations. If you know that your game is going to be released on a certain date and it may not be everything it was cracked up to be, or consumers may expect something different, be very forthright about that and say, we're releasing this game on a certain day with these flaws. They will be fixed by such a time. Thanks for sticking with us. And that's something that I think communication between the publisher and the consumer is what's most important in things like this, because with Watch Dogs, you had a game that was delayed a certain amount of time, and as much as there was backlash from consumers who wanted it on a certain date, I think the fact that they took the time, the publishers that is, to fix things that they thought merited fixing and wait to put out the best product they could, I think that earned them some points with their consumer base.
And took the time to explain it. They didn't bury it in tiny print on the back of the box or worse yet, in the shrink wrap agreement or end user licensing agreement, and say somewhere that once you started playing this game, you accept it as is with no warranty as to features, defects, or anything else.
Yeah, you can't bury something like that. That's not fair to anyone, and that's just not good business practice or a legal one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, this has been Ross and Zed, and we hope you've enjoyed this edition of Ross and Zed Talk Games.
Have a good one.